Episode 9 is said to be the end of the Skywalker Saga, but what exactly does that mean? What exactly is the story of the Skywalkers, and how could this be closed up in Episode 9? In this video, I want to explore this topic and speculate about what might happen in Episode 9 that could bring closure to this epic time period and story that surrounds the bloodline of the Skywalkers. Before we get into this, I need to shout out Brian Miller, who got the nerd card question correct in my recent video talking about Disney's plan for the future of Star Wars. You definitely know your stuff when it comes to Star Wars, Brian, so shout out to you. We're going to do another nerd card question at the end of this video. So Lucasfilm and Disney are billing Star Wars Episode 9 as the end of the Skywalker Saga. So let's talk about what this means. How could this wrap everything up? What are we looking for out of Star Wars Episode 9 to put closure on this chapter? Well, first, let's talk about what a saga actually is. So a saga is a long story that has legendary figures and legendary events. So that's why up to this point, the 8 films that we have had have all circled around the Skywalker Saga. It's a big story that all has to do with these epic figures like Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, Luke Skywalker, and Leia Organa. And in all reality, this really has to do with Anakin. It all starts with Anakin, and then the story has to do with the Force, what it does to Anakin and his offspring. So let's talk about this a little bit. And of course, most of you know this already, but it's important for the context of how it could all end. So it begins with this vergence in the Force, right? Which is a concentration of the Force. Now, it doesn't have to be surrounding a person. It can be objects, it can be places, moments in time, but particularly to the Skywalker Saga, we have to understand that Anakin is a vergence in the Force. He is born of the Force. And so in this way, Anakin has a cosmic origin. This has to do with the cosmic force coming in and activating itself into the living force. Now, if the midichlorians, which I know some people hate even bringing up, but if the midichlorians are how the cosmic force communicates and influences things within the living force, and Anakin is conceived purely of midichlorians, then he is from this cosmic origin that is given into the living through the vessel that is the midichlorians. Now, whether or not Anakin's birth was manipulated by a Force user, or it was just a product of like cosmic divine intervention, meaning it was the Force itself that did it, either way, it is a cosmic level vergence in the Force type of event, and the galaxy was never the same after Anakin was born. And so this is when the saga begins, and the life of Anakin is really the first chapter of the saga, and his manipulation and eventual fall to the dark side is one of these epic moments in the story. And I mean, I don't have to tell you this, but Darth Vader and the becoming of Darth Vader was massively impactful to the galaxy. He essentially called off a lot of the Jedi, paved the way for the Empire, destroying the Republic behind it, and setting up the galaxy for a completely new phase. Now, what's interesting here is that despite doing this and turning, Anakin actually does still fulfill the prophecy. His offspring, Luke and Leia, which were conceived by Anakin Skywalker, not Darth Vader, come to find that there is still good within this Dark Lord of the Sith. And of course, this all has to do with Luke Skywalker, his journey, and he becomes a legendary figure within this story because of not only his connection to Anakin and to Vader, but what he does with that connection. And so he gets Anakin Skywalker to take back control from Darth Vader, and he destroys the Emperor, fulfilling the prophecy and destroying the Sith. Once again, legendary figures, big epic moment for the galaxy. Now, in the years following the event that destroyed the Sith and set up the Empire to fail and the birth of the New Republic, Darth Vader is still hanging over everything. That figure is still considered terrible. He's a horrible villain. He hangs over everything. Now, Luke Skywalker attains mythic status, becomes a hero, but actually rejects the responsibilities of his own hero status. And so that is the story of the saga so far. You have the creation of Anakin, you have his fall to the dark side, you have his redemption by Luke Skywalker, but then the galaxy is still massively affected by all of these events and the actions of Vader and the inactions of Luke Skywalker. This brings us to episode 9, to the sequel trilogy, and to the character of Ben Solo, who of course has the mighty Skywalker blood. To our knowledge, Ben is the last of the Skywalkers, and his decisions will be the final moments of the Skywalker saga. His impact on the galaxy will be the end of this period in time. And so for audiences, like, how can this work? Like, how can we bring closure to this story? How can we end the Skywalker saga properly? Well, I think it has a lot to do with recontextualizing things and giving more context to the entire thing. Meaning, we will have a better idea of what was actually happening with the Skywalkers and why it was so important to the Force that this happened. I think one of the main ways this could happen, and one of the things I'm very much hoping for in episode 9, is a better explanation of the birth of Anakin in general. As I stated earlier in the video, there's a lot to suggest that Anakin's birth was actually manipulated by a dark side user, whether that would be Plagueis or Sidious himself. And I think that would be very important. Like, is this actually a prophecy? Was the prophecy itself created falsely by some dark side users? Is there anything actually going on here that's cosmic and that actually is the will of the Force, or is this all a perversion? And the idea is that these people thought they were so important, but in all actuality they were not. Conversely, it could be explained the exact opposite way, where this was the byproduct of the Force, completely necessary for a wider and deeper understanding of the Force itself, and it was important to set up the galaxy for what the future Force users will do and how they'll interact with the cosmic and the living Force. There are crazy theories about how the Force birth itself is a continuous thing, that this continues to happen within the galaxy in order to give the living Force the context it needs to understand the cosmic Force and to really merge that relationship. There's a lot of parallels you can draw here between the Christ story. There are all kinds of different mythic stories about virgin birth, about cosmic destinies, and different things like that. And so I believe if we get a better explanation for what exactly happened with Anakin, we will have better context for what was going on with the Skywalkers. We'll have a better understanding of why the Skywalkers are so special, and we will have more of an understanding of how this might manifest itself in the future. I also think this will be particularly important for the Ben Solo character. I mean, Ben has to have more context for what is going on here. I think he's being pulled in all of these sort of ways. He's so powerful. He's so emotional. You know, they hid the fact that he was Vader's offspring or Vader's grandson from him. That shocks him. He feels a kinship to that. He feels the power of the dark side, yet he's drawn to the light. All of these things, they need to make more sense to him. And I think for him to understand his own path and to make a better decision and redeem perhaps himself and the Skywalker line, this context of what the Skywalkers are will be very important. And it'll also be great for audiences. Like, audiences will love that. This is a great way to tie this all up. We'll have more of a context. And ultimately, the thing that I'm looking for here is that I can rewatch all of the Star Wars films and keep this new knowledge in mind and have sort of a new experience with the material as I watch it. I think another thing that could give closure to fans and bring an end to the Skywalker saga is understanding what the Force actually wants. There is a higher knowledge to the Force. There is some kind of a truth that organic beings and most things within the living Force are not privy to. This is repeated multiple times in all sorts of canon material. Darth Plagueis was looking for this truth. Darth Sidious was looking for this truth. Luke Skywalker was looking for this truth. And Snoke was looking for this truth. Now, more recently, in things like Star Wars Rebels and in different novels and comic books, we've been introduced to a whole new understanding of how the cosmic force is working and what it is capable of. There's the world between worlds, which is sort of like a cosmic watch station for different moments in time, which technically would allow time travel. There's things like the Mortis gods and their whole arc and the combination of the cosmic force with the destiny of creatures within the living. There are those weird white robes and staff that Ahsoka is shown wearing and holding at the end of Star Wars Rebels, kind of making us believe that she has come to some kind of a new understanding when it comes to the Force. And then there's obviously what Luke Skywalker was learning, which literally caused him to not want to be a Jedi anymore. And so I think understanding a little bit more of this great mystery, understanding a little bit more of what true balance actually is, what the Force desires, if anything, and the right way to live as an organic being, considering your power and ability within the Force. All of these things matter quite a bit, and they would recontextualize everything that is going on in the Skywalker Saga and bring a lot of closure for fans and for the character of Ben Solo when it comes to this time period. If Ben discovers this, which I truly believe has to do with his connection to Rey, which I've explained in my Cosmic Force video, but if he discovers this, I think it would be a powerful enough truth to get him to walk away from his current path, the current things that he values, and to understand a little bit more. It all has to do with what balance actually is, what the Skywalker line actually was, and the responsibility that Ben has with that kind of knowledge in mind. It will ultimately define him, and the choices he makes with that knowledge in mind will define what the Skywalkers are. I think both literally and metaphorically, this is all pointing towards balance. I mean, think about it. You have the legacy of Darth Vader, which is marred and evil, darkness, horrible things. You have the legacy of Luke Skywalker, which is lifted up. It's heroic. It's a thing of mythic status. He was the good that saw the good in Vader, right? So you have one evil and you have one good, and now you have Ben Solo, which really embodies both. He embodies good and he embodies evil. He is the way for actual true balance, perhaps the actual chosen one, and given the context of this sort of a lesson and the ultimate truth of what the Force actually is and what the Force desires would be very important to this character and to ending the Skywalker Saga. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here is the likelihood that Rey and Kylo will have a child. And I think this is something that people get upset about because, well, first of all, some people just don't want this to happen, but also because if they are billing Episode 9 as the end of the Skywalker Saga and a Skywalker, Ben Solo, conceives a child with someone like Rey, then technically their offspring is still a Skywalker and would still carry on the Skywalker Saga. But I would make the argument here that the idea of the Skywalker Saga can still end while there is technically someone within the Skywalker bloodline still alive. And like I said before, the saga itself is really just a long story with legendary figures and legendary moments in time. And I believe there will be an end cap to that story when it comes to Ben Solo. He will do something that will end cap what is going on with the Skywalkers. Not to mention, as we move forward in time, all of the memories and context of the Skywalkers, which currently still weighs heavily and hangs over the comings and goings on of the galaxy, will fade into distant memory. People will no longer still be afraid to talk about Darth Vader or bring up Darth Vader like it was yesterday. And similarly, when it comes to Luke Skywalker, people will stop looking for him to be the mythic hero, to continue to save the galaxy and just show up and help people. And so I think in a way, from a certain point of view, even if there is technically still Skywalker descendants around in the galaxy, the saga itself surrounding the Skywalkers, which mostly has to do with Anakin and Luke and Ben Solo, will have an end cap and will no longer continue on. I do think that this Force child will be the central character for the next saga and the next series of films and the next big event within the galaxy. But not only do I not believe that that character will take on the name Skywalker, but the legacy created by this character, being the offspring of Rey and Ben Solo, will sort of forge their own path. This will be the new state of things. And I expect this character to be incredibly gifted and incredibly powerful, but also probably flawed, have to deal with the same old thing that we always deal with, the corruption versus, being noble, that whole sort of thing. And so whatever the name of this character is, maybe they won't even have a last name. Maybe Rey will adopt a new last name. Maybe she'll just take the name Solo. Whatever the next chapter here is, it will no longer be about the Skywalkers, mostly separating itself from the characters of Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, Luke Skywalker, and Leia Organa. That will be considered the past. That will be one solitary chapter in the timeline. And then what happens next, even though technically still still an extension of that line, will be its own thing. Not to mention that I truly believe that this next character is going to be conceived through the cosmic force with Rey and Ben. And so very similar to what happened with Anakin, it's a fresh start, right? I mean, technically there were Skywalkers before Anakin. I mean, Shmi is one, whoever Shmi's parents were Skywalkers, but that's not what we talk about when we talk about the saga of the Skywalkers. Like I said, again, legendary figures, legendary events. And so whatever happens with this new character, it will all be that saga. That will be the new epic, right? And so that's going to do it for this video. Just some of my thoughts on how this could exactly work in Star Wars Episode 9, because there's a lot of questions here about what the legacy of the Skywalkers are, how you would wrap this up. I've given some context of things that I think would more or less bring closure to this, and there will be an end cap that is a decision made by Ben Solo. Also, technically, though, I think the bloodline will continue on. It will no longer be considered the Skywalker Saga from a certain point of view. Let me know your thoughts about this. I mean, what are you thinking about Star Wars Episode 9? How do you think Ben Solo will end cap the Skywalker Saga? And what do you think we're going to do next? Where do you think the story goes from here? Wherever your thoughts are about this, let me know in the comment section below. All right, let's check that nerd card before we get out of here. I want to know, what is the name of the character that ended up marrying Anakin Skywalker's mom, Shmi Skywalker? What was that character's name? Answer that question in the comment section below. You can, of course, click below to watch some more cool videos. Got tons of Star Wars, tons of Marvel, tons of crazy stuff like that. Make sure you subscribe, enable notifications. Come back every Sunday for in-depth Star Wars videos. And yeah, that's going to do it. As I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and nerdy day, and I will see you in the next video.